The sewers beneath old District 9 had long since become home for people like Eli, the forgotten, the poor, and the ones who didn't want to be seen. For him, it wasn't so bad. The air stank. The water dripped endlessly, and the rats were more confident than most men, but it was safe. Up there, in the city above, the alien patrols didn't care who starved or froze. Down here, he could at least live. That night, as he returned from scavenging, his flashlight beam caught something unusual. At first, he thought it was just another junk pile, a heap of pale fabric tangled around a pipe. But then, the fabric moved. Hey! Eli crouched, lifting the light higher. It wasn't fabric. It was skin, smooth, almost translucent, with faint veins glowing beneath. A girl lay there, curled up against a concrete wall. She was hairless, entirely, her scalp gleaming under the dim light. Her body was thin, frail, and trembling. She wore only a loose, torn cloak, no shoes, no markings, nothing to say who she was or where she'd come from. When Eli reached closer, she flinched violently, pressing her back against the wall like an animal caught in a trap. "It's okay," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." Her eyes met his, and he froze. They weren't human eyes. They shimmered like quicksilver, reflecting his own face in miniature. What happened to you?" She didn't answer. Her lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. Then she fainted. Eli carried her back to a small shelter, a makeshift room behind a collapsed tunnel. He laid her on a cot of blankets, wrapped her in an old coat, and tried to warm her hands. They were icy, like she'd been walking barefoot through snow. For hours, she didn't stir. When she finally did, she stared around the dim space, confused. "Water?" Eli asked, holding up a tin cup. She blinked, hesitated, then drank greedily. He tried asking her name. No response. Tried asking where she came from. She only stared. Finally, she whispered one word, haltingly, like she wasn't used to speaking. "Cold." That was all. Over the next 2 days, she stayed in a shelter. She barely ate, only sipped water and shivered under blankets. Eli noticed small, almost geometric scars on her arms, like surgical marks. Sometimes, when she dozed, she twitched and whispered things in a language he couldn't understand. When he brought her food, bread, canned beans, whatever you find, she always looked surprised, as if no one had ever offered her food before. "You've got to eat something," he said one evening. "You'll die otherwise." She stared at him again with those liquid silver eyes. "Why help?" she asked, the words trembling on her tongue. He sighed. "Because you needed it." She blinked, as if she didn't understand the concept. 3 nights later, she pointed at a bucket of rainwater near the tunnel entrance. "Bath," she whispered. Eli hesitated. "You sure? It's cold." She nodded slowly, her thin hand clutching the edge of the blanket. So he warmed the water the best he could, setting a small fire and transferring heated pots into the bucket. Then he turned his back. He heard the splash of water, the faint sound of her washing. Then silence. "Everything okay?" he called. No answer. He turned around carefully. The girl was sitting in the water, her knees pulled to her chest, but her shoulders were shaking. She wasn't cold. She was crying. Her face was twisted in pain, silent sobs racking her thin frame. The tears ran down her smooth, hairless cheeks and fell into the water like quicksilver drops. Eli froze. Hey, it's okay." He moved closer, but stopped when she flinched. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." She looked up at him with those silver eyes, now dim with sorrow. "It hurts," she whispered. "What does?" "Being here." Her voice cracked, and the words that followed came out like pieces of shattered memory. "They took everything. My name, my voice, my stars." She pressed her palms against her face. "I can't go back. They said I'm not pure anymore." Eli didn't know what to say. He just knelt beside her, the warmth of the fire flickering against the wet walls. After a long pause, he reached out and gently set a towel over her shoulders. "Then you don't have to go back," he said quietly. "Stay here, at least until you figure something out." She stared at him as though she couldn't believe the words. Slowly, she whispered, "Stay?" He nodded. Something in her eyes softened. Days turned into weeks. The nameless girl, he started calling her Nova because of her strange glowing eyes, grew stronger. She learned more words, mimicking Eli's speech patterns, and even helped him scavenge. She smiled sometimes, though only faintly, like someone learning what joy felt like for the first time. But there were odd things about her. When the sewers trembled from the trains above, she flinched violently, clutching her ears. When he lit matches, she stared at the flame as though mesmerized. And sometimes, when she was alone, her skin shimmered faintly, tiny patterns moving beneath, like light shifting underwater. Once, Eli asked if she remembered anything. She nodded slowly. "They made us," she said, "from stars, from codes. But I failed." "Failed what?" "To obey." Eli frowned. "You were some kind of experiment?" She didn't answer. She just looked down at her hands, whispering, "They erased my name so no one could call me home." That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He watched her curled up by the fire, her faintly luminous skin casting ghostly light on the concrete walls. What had she been through? Who had done this to her? A week later, while scavenging near the surface, Eli noticed strange drones hovering overhead, sleek, metallic, marked with alien insignia. They weren't the usual patrols. They were searching. When he returned, Nova was trembling again. "They're close," she whispered. "They smell me." "What do you mean?" She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "If they find me, they'll take me apart again. They'll make me forget you." Eli's heart pounded. "Then we'll hide. There are tunnels they'll never find." But Nova shook her head. "No, they always find." Her eyes glimmered with resolve. "I can stop them, but it will hurt." "Stop them? How?" She didn't answer. She simply walked to the entrance, barefoot, the faint glow beneath her skin growing brighter, turning her into a beacon in the dark. "Nova," he shouted. "Don't." But she was already gone. The sky above District 9 flashed white that night. A soundless wave rolled through the air, shattering windows and short-circuiting drones. The next morning, the patrols were gone. Eli climbed to the surface, searching, calling her name. He found her near the edge of the old river, collapsed in the mud. Her body was barely glowing now, the patterns under her skin fading. He knelt beside her, panic rising. "Nova, stay with me." Her lips curved faintly. "You gave me a name," she whispered. "Now I can rest." "No, don't you dare. We're gonna get you help." She lifted a trembling hand and touched his cheek. "Thank you for letting me be human for a little while." And with that, the glow in her eyes dimmed completely. Eli buried her deep in the sewers, where the light couldn't reach, marking the spot with a small piece of metal shaped like a star. For weeks afterward, he kept expecting to hear her soft footsteps, her awkward voice asking about strange human things. But one night, As he sat by the fire, the air shimmered faintly, like starlight dancing on water. He looked up and saw faint silver trails moving across the ceiling, spelling out one word. Home. Eli smiled sadly. Maybe. Somewhere among the stars, the girl with no name had finally found hers.